Okay, first you have to understand what's behind the case. And this is I live in a small farming community about an hour and a half outside of New York in the Hudson River Valley. It's principally an agricultural community. Now, the small farmers can't make it, so they sell off their land and people build very modest houses. It doesn't have a rail line to it, so it can't be a commuter destination. So we've sort of, what has happened on the other side of the river in Westchester sort of passed over us. They decided to build, it was actually, they decided, whoever they is, a 650 megawatt fracked gas-fired power plant in this small community called Wawayanda. And in order to accomplish this, they basically bribed the New York State government to pass the lead agency authority, in other words, the person who would grant the permits and establish the regulations for this plant, from the Department of Energy and Conservation in Albany to a local town board that knew absolutely nothing about fracked gas, about power plants, about distribution, about what the objective of the oil companies, the overreaching objective was. And Joseph Percoco, who is a very close aide to Governor Cuomo, in fact, some people refer to him as Governor Cuomo's other brother, he and a man from the company, which is called Competitive Power Ventures, which builds these kinds of fracked gas-fired power plants all over the country, they discussed on their private email state business, which is illegal, involving sums of money, basically bribes, to be paid to government officials in order to grease the rails to allow this project to go forward. So the U.S. Attorney General, Preet Bharara, had what I consider a airtight case against these conspirators, because he had their emails in which they referred to the actions that they were taking on behalf of the company and the money that exchanged hands, and the various other things that Percoco actually left Albany to run Cuomo's reelection campaign from the governor's office in New York, which is also against the law. So a lot of laws were broken, just as they are broken now every day in Washington. Every day we hear of another law that's been broken, or another protocol that's been broken, or a regulatory agency that has been eviscerated. And much the same thing happened here. The trial has been going on. One of the co-conspirators pleaded guilty and became the star witness for the prosecution. Unfortunately, he has a history of this kind of shenanigans, and so whether the jury will choose to believe him remains to be seen. What is peculiar about the case, well, actually it's not so peculiar, is that there is a great deal of discussion about the law and what someone may or may not have done, but no discussion as to the raison d'etre for their corruption, which was the building of this power plant and its effect on the local community, why the local community has been fighting this. We don't need a 650 megawatt power plant. We only use 43% of the energy that we have available in New York as it is. This one plant will necessitate 150 fracking wells, new fracking wells, every year over a 40-year period in order to sustain this plant. And it's only one plant. And this company and the government, under the Clean Air Plan, planned 300 more of these plants to be built all over the country. If you look at a map of the county where most of the frack gas comes from, which is called near a town called Dimmock, they have 1,075 wells in this small community. And each one of those wells is connected by pipeline to a compressor station, and then the compressor station drives it out to pipelines that carry it up to where we are. This is going to happen all over the country. What they are basically doing is turning the best parts of America into an industrial zone which will make us look like Eastern Poland. Because what you have is you have leaking methane, you have water that is contaminated by the fracking fluid, which has to be pumped into the ground, high pressure injected back into the ground. Now, it's one thing to say in Pennsylvania, probably nothing will happen. But when you think that this is going to happen in California, whose shale field is ever so much larger than the Pennsylvania shale field, the Marcellus shale field, and they're going to pump that, inject that water back into the ground. We live in California on the San Andreas Fault. Who knows? If fracking turned Oklahoma into the earthquake capital of the country, actually maybe even of the world, they have so many earthquakes, you don't hear about them in Oklahoma, what would it do to California? That's an interesting thing. He did not ban fracking. It's a moratorium. The difference is, if it were a ban, it would have had the weight of law behind it. It does not have the weight of law. It did not involve the legislature. There was not a vote. It was a moratorium, which can be lifted at any time. It was his moratorium. Now, that's where you begin to get into conjecture. Governor Cuomo needs or wants very much to close down Indian Point nuclear power plant. One, because the plant is so old that it now represents a danger. Two, because it involves a great deal of very valuable real estate. But in order to sell that to New York City, which receives a lot of its power, it has to guarantee the people, the moneyed interest in New York, that they will have a power source. Now, since we only use 43%, there's plenty of power. But what he got was, he got 2 for 1. He got to close down Indian Point because it will be closed down. And he also got the oil and gas industry to sort of, as you can tell in Washington, our leaders really only serve their donors. They are elected by moneyed interests, mostly the corporations and PACs, and they do the bidding of those PACs, whether they're Republicans or Democrats, because those are the people that guarantee their election. They know that. So Governor Cuomo not only is going to, a very popular move of closing down Indian Point, but he's also saying to the business community, and you see, we can develop frack gas infrastructure. We now use more fracked gas in New York than we did before the moratorium. And Con Ed is trying to convince everybody in New York to get rid of their electric stove and use what they call natural gas. But that is fracked gas. In other words, it becomes very much more difficult if there's a downside to this plant across the Hudson River, away from New York, that is affecting people's health in the local community, if everybody in New York is connected to this gas. However, if everybody in New York turns on their stove and it doesn't go right on, that is methane that goes up into the air, and it's 86 times a more potent greenhouse gas than CO2. So the whole process is fraught. Well, I'm not, the only use that I serve this movement really basically is my celebrity. Because of the limited celebrity that I do have, people want to talk to me, news agencies want to talk to me, I get interviews, they put a microphone in my face, and I get to speak not so much for myself, but for all the people who don't get asked. Like Pramila Malik, who started this organization, who knows an infinite amount more than I do. What I supported, and I still do, is civil disobedience, nonviolent civil disobedience. And we finally convinced at least several people to join us in doing a nonviolent civil disobedience action to close down the plant, which is, of course, it's simply symbolic. You only close it down for as long as it takes the highway patrol to cut the bicycle lock with which you locked yourself together. You go to trial, and the judge in the trial allowed us what is called the necessity defense. That is, that the problem that you were addressing with your action is more dangerous and inimical to to the health and safety of the people in the local community than the violation of the statute of which you are charged. What you basically have to prove is that this danger is imminent, and that, of course, it is greater. So we got two of the best environmental scientists, Bob Howarth and Tony Ingraffia, to come down, and they laid out in no uncertain terms what this plant means not only for the people, the local people, and the people in the state of New York, but also in terms of global warming in the planet's entirety, the rising sea levels, the danger from the effluviants in the burned gas. And the judge ruled that our blocking of traffic for 20 minutes on Route 6, even though it was really not blocked at all, traffic went on, was the more egregious wrong, because the plant was not finished yet and therefore did not pose an imminent danger. So that gives you an idea of the stupidity and the obtuseness of the kind of thinking which says we can go on doing what we're doing, the releasing of methane gas and the pollution from the burning of fossil fuels, and somebody else is going to have to pay for it. When it really gets bad and New York is underwater, then we'll put our heads together and see what we can do about it, because then the danger will be imminent. Well, a message to Governor Cuomo is to love New York and don't frack it up. Governor Cuomo has, in his office, the power to stop this. Given the amount of corruption and what we now know is going to come out of this plant, from the emissions of this plant, what's going to happen in Pennsylvania in the fracking fields, the hypocrisy of having a moratorium on hydrofracking in New York State, but hydrofracking Pennsylvania until they take people's maple trees down to build these pipelines. They come with M16s and body armor and dogs. And so I would say, basically, what we have to do is we have to elect progressives who have made a commitment not to take dark money from PACs or large corporations, and who owe their allegiance to the people who elect them. If we could elect progressives from the local level and on the state level and on the federal level, we could begin to shift this, because then their priority would be the well-being of ordinary citizens on whose vote they depend, rather than their donors. Money in politics is what is corrupting this country. Moneyed interests understand this. They were given carte blanche by the Supreme Court in probably the stupidest decision ever rendered by the Supreme Court, except for Dred Scott. And the effect that it has had, if any of them had any conscience at all, they would rescind this. They know they can do it because they sure want to do it with Roe v. Wade anytime they get a chance. So this is one that really has got to be changed, but the only way to change it is to do it through a groundswell. And the only voice that we have as citizens is our vote. But we have to inform ourselves, and if there is not a candidate running, we have to run. Like the wonderful woman in West Virginia who stood up in the House of Delegates in West Virginia and started reading out all the donors of all the deputies in the room who were in support of changing a regulation which imperiled the state of West Virginia. They shut off her microphone and they physically pushed her out of the State House. But that woman is going to run. Her name is Lisa Lucas, and she's going to run. And by God, she's going to win. And she's not going to take orders from the petrochemical industry.